I left my husband tonight. But the hardest part was discovering he might have been waiting for me to give up on him all along. Ethan Carter never imagined those words would become the truth of his life. For 5 years, he had believed love was supposed to feel like a safe place, a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone would always choose you. But somewhere between late nights at the office, unanswered messages, and dinners eaten alone at a kitchen table meant for two, that feeling had slowly disappeared. The house that once held their dreams now felt like a beautiful place where he had become invisible. Ethan stood in the doorway of the nursery, his fingers resting gently on the edge of the crib where his son, Oliver, slept peacefully. The soft glow of the nightlight painted the room in warm colors, making everything look almost perfect. Almost. He looked at the framed photo on the shelf beside the crib. It showed him and Nathan Williams smiling on their wedding day, before the silence, before the distance, before Ethan started wondering if he was the only one still fighting for their family. Nathan had once been the man who remembered every little thing about him. His favorite coffee order, the songs that made him smile, the stories he used to draw when he was younger. But over time, Nathan became someone Ethan barely recognized. The powerful alpha CEO who could control a company worth millions seemed unable to say the one sentence Ethan needed most. I love you. Ethan had tried. He had tried to understand the endless meetings, the pressure, the responsibilities Nathan carried on his shoulders. He told himself that love did not always look like movie scenes or grand gestures. Sometimes love was quiet. Sometimes love was simply staying. But lately, Ethan wondered if he was the only one staying. He remembered the night he waited 3 hours for Nathan to come home because he had prepared a small celebration for their anniversary. The food had gone cold. The candles had burned down. And when Nathan finally walked through the door, exhausted and distracted, he had apologized before even realizing what day it was. That moment had hurt more than any argument. Because anger meant someone still cared. Silence meant something else. Ethan looked down at Oliver, watching his tiny chest rise and fall peacefully. Their son deserved a home filled with love, not a place where two people pretended everything was fine. That was when Ethan made his decision. He would leave, not because he stopped loving Nathan, but because he needed to know if Nathan still loved him enough to notice. He packed only a small suitcase, a few clothes, some personal items, a sketchbook he had not touched in years. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Oliver. Before leaving, he paused outside Nathan's office door. The light was still on. Nathan was probably working again, buried under documents and phone calls, unaware that his family was slipping away. Ethan almost knocked, almost gave him one more chance to stop him, but his hand slowly lowered. "Goodbye, Nathan," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. He carried the suitcase downstairs and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The front door closed behind him with a soft click. It was not a dramatic ending. There were no angry words, no accusations, just a quiet moment where Ethan finally chose himself. What Nathan did not know was that Ethan had not gone far. He had left the house, but he had not completely disappeared. Hidden from sight, with one final question still burning inside his heart, Ethan activated the baby monitor connection on his phone. He did not know what he expected to hear. Maybe silence, maybe frustration, maybe proof that leaving had been the right choice. But as the screen connected and the familiar sound of the nursery filled his ears, Ethan held his breath. Because for the first time in months, he was about to hear Nathan when Nathan thought nobody was listening. The house had never felt so quiet before. Nathan Williams had spent years believing silence was peaceful, a sign that everything was under control. But that night, when he walked through the front door and heard nothing except the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the city outside, the silence felt different. It felt empty. He placed his briefcase on the table and looked around the living room. The small details he usually overlooked suddenly stood out. Oliver's favorite blanket was missing from the couch. Ethan's sketchbook was gone from the shelf. The cup Ethan always used in the morning was no longer beside the coffee machine. Nathan stopped moving. For the first time, he understood that the house had not simply become quieter. Someone had taken their presence with them. He walked upstairs slowly, his usual confident expression replaced by something uncertain. The nursery door was slightly open. He pushed it gently and saw Oliver sleeping peacefully in his crib. Nathan stood there for a long moment, watching his son. In the business world, people knew him as a man who never hesitated. A successful alpha CEO who built an empire through discipline and determination. Employees respected him. Competitors feared his decisions. But standing in that small room, he felt like none of those achievements mattered, because the one person he wanted to impress was no longer there to see them. Nathan sat beside the crib and carefully picked up the small stuffed animal Oliver always carried. He remembered when Ethan bought it before their son was born. Ethan had laughed and said that their baby needed something comforting while growing up. At the time, Nathan had smiled and promised that he would give their child everything. A safe home, a happy family, a father who would always be there. But somewhere along the way, he had broken that promise. His phone buzzed on the table. Messages from his company appeared one after another, asking about tomorrow's meetings and important decisions. Nathan looked at the screen but did not answer. For once, the company could wait. His family could not. He reached for the baby monitor beside the crib and adjusted it slightly, making sure he could hear Oliver if he needed him. Then he noticed something strange. Ethan's phone connection was still linked to the monitor system. Nathan did not know that Ethan was listening. He did not know that every word he said would soon reveal the truth he had hidden for years. Nathan lowered his head and whispered softly to his sleeping son, "I do not know if your other dad will ever forgive me." Ethan froze on the other side of the connection. His fingers tightened around his phone. He had expected anger. He had expected frustration. He had expected Nathan to blame him for leaving. But he never expected to hear pain in his husband's voice. Nathan continued quietly, "I know he thinks I stopped caring. Maybe I made him believe that because I never knew how to explain myself." Ethan stared at the screen, unable to look away. The man he thought had forgotten him was sitting alone in their son's room, talking about him when he was not even there. Nathan looked at Oliver and gently smiled through the sadness in his eyes. "Your dad is the strongest person I know. He gave up so much for us. He gave up his dreams, his art, his time, and I was so focused on protecting our future that I forgot to take care of our present." Ethan felt a wave of emotion he could not understand. For months, he had convinced himself that Nathan's silence meant indifference. But now he was hearing something different. Regret. Nathan picked up a small drawing Oliver had made earlier that week. It was a simple picture of 3 people holding hands under a bright blue sky. "I wanted to be better," Nathan whispered. "I wanted to become the father and husband you both deserved. I just did not know how to fix everything I had already damaged." Outside the house, Ethan stood completely still. The night air around him felt colder than before, but his heart felt heavier for a different reason. He had left hoping to discover whether Nathan cared. Now he was discovering something far more complicated. Nathan did care. He had just been hiding behind his own fears and mistakes. Ethan looked back at the glowing screen of the baby monitor. For the first time in a long time, he wondered if he had only seen half of the story. And inside the quiet nursery, Nathan continued speaking to their son, unaware that the person he missed most was hearing every word. Ethan had spent months wondering if he was still important to Nathan Williams. But now, standing alone in the darkness outside their home, he was discovering a truth he never expected. Nathan had not stopped loving him. He had simply become someone who did not know how to show it. The sound of Nathan's voice through the baby monitor continued to echo in Ethan's mind. Every word carried a sadness that felt impossible to ignore. The man Ethan believed had forgotten him was sitting in their son's room, admitting that he had failed the family he loved most. Ethan lowered his phone slightly, his emotions pulling him in different directions. Part of him wanted to walk back inside immediately. Part of him remembered every lonely dinner, every missed conversation, every night when he wondered if Nathan even noticed how much he was hurting. Love was complicated. It was not just about having feelings. It was about making the other person feel those feelings. And that was where Nathan had failed. Inside the nursery, Nathan remained beside Oliver's crib. He looked at the small drawing in his hand, the one with 3 figures standing together. "I used to think providing everything was enough," Nathan whispered. "I thought if I built a successful company, protected our future, and gave you both a comfortable life, then I was doing my job." He paused, looking down at his son. "But I forgot that a family does not only need security. It needs time. It needs attention. It needs someone who is present." Ethan felt his breath catch. Those were the exact words he had wished Nathan would understand for so long. Not because Ethan wanted expensive gifts or grand promises. He only wanted Nathan to sit with him, to ask about his day, to notice when he was tired, to remember that he was more than just the person who kept their home together. Nathan gently placed the drawing back on the shelf. "Your other dad used to draw every night after work," he said softly. "He had so many dreams. I remember how excited he was when people started noticing his artwork. Then Oliver was born, and he gave up more than anyone realized." Ethan closed his eyes. Hearing Nathan remember those details hurt in a way he did not expect, because it meant Nathan had been watching. He had noticed. He had just stayed silent. The silence between them had not come from a lack of love. It had come from 2 people who were both afraid, both waiting for the other person to speak first. Nathan continued talking to Oliver, unaware that Ethan was listening. "I should have told him that I was proud of him. I should have told him that I never saw him as someone who gave things up for us. I saw him as the reason our house became a home." Ethan looked toward the window of the house. The warm light from the nursery spilled onto the front yard, creating a small golden space in the middle of the night. For a moment, he imagined walking back through that door. He imagined sitting beside Nathan and asking why he had hidden all these feelings. But fear held him back. Because hearing the truth was one thing. Facing the years of hurt was another. Nathan finally picked up Oliver and held him carefully, speaking in a quiet voice. "I hope someday he knows that every difficult choice I made was because I wanted to keep you both safe. I just forgot that love cannot survive when people feel alone." Those words stayed with Ethan. They were not excuses. Nathan was not pretending he had done everything right. He was admitting that he had made mistakes. For the first time, Ethan saw the man behind the title, behind the reputation, behind the confident alpha everyone else knew. He saw a husband who was lost, a father who was afraid, a person who had been carrying feelings he never shared. Ethan looked at the baby monitor screen again. Oliver was peacefully asleep in Nathan's arms. The image should have made him angry. Instead, it made him remember the moments before everything changed. The small family breakfasts, the laughter in the kitchen, the dreams they once built together. Maybe their love had not disappeared. Maybe it had simply been buried under years of silence. But before Ethan could decide what to do next, Nathan said something that made him completely still. "If Ethan comes back, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of him." For the first time in years, Nathan Williams admitted the truth he had been too afraid to say out loud. He was not losing his family because he did not love them. He was losing them because he had spent so long trying to protect them that he forgot they needed his heart, not just his effort. Ethan stood outside the house, frozen by those words. The night around him felt strangely quiet, as if the world had stopped to give him time to understand what he was hearing. Nathan had always appeared impossible to break. To everyone else, he was the confident alpha CEO who walked into a room and changed the atmosphere without saying a word. He made difficult decisions. He carried responsibility. He solved problems before anyone else even noticed them. But Ethan was seeing a side of Nathan that nobody else knew existed. A man who was afraid. A husband who was unsure. A father who worried he was not enough. Ethan looked down at his phone and watched the small image of Nathan sitting beside Oliver's crib. It was difficult to connect that quiet man with the person he had felt so distant from. For months, Ethan had believed Nathan's silence meant he no longer cared. Now he wondered if the silence had been hiding something much deeper. Inside the nursery, Nathan gently placed Oliver back in his crib and sat there for a while longer. He looked around the room, filled with small memories. The wooden shelf Ethan had painted by hand. The tiny blanket they chose together before Oliver was born. The little decorations they bought while imagining what their future family would look like. Nathan remembered every detail. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Nathan whispered. "When the company grew, I thought working harder meant giving you a better life. When problems came up, I thought carrying everything alone was my responsibility." His voice became softer. "But I never realized that by keeping everything inside, I was making you feel like you were alone." Ethan felt tears forming in his eyes. He quickly wiped them away, almost frustrated with himself. He had spent so much time convincing himself that he was forgotten. Yet here was Nathan, remembering every sacrifice, every dream, every moment Ethan had given to their family. But another feeling remained. Pain did not disappear just because someone finally understood it. The years of loneliness were still real. The empty conversations were still real. The moments when Ethan needed Nathan and found only a closed door were still real. Love could explain mistakes, but it could not erase them overnight. Nathan leaned back in the chair and looked toward the baby monitor. "I should have told him the truth sooner," he said. "I should have told him that after every long day, he was the first person I wanted to see. I should have told him that hearing Oliver laugh with him was my favorite sound in the world." Ethan covered his mouth, trying to stay quiet. Those words were everything he had wanted to hear. Not because they solved everything. Not because they changed the past. But because they proved something important. Nathan had never stopped seeing him. He had never stopped loving the family they built. He had simply forgotten how to let them feel that love. Then Nathan reached for a small box on the shelf beside the crib. Ethan recognized it immediately. It was the same box where they kept memories from the early days of their relationship. Nathan opened it carefully and looked inside. "I kept these because I never wanted to forget who we were before life became complicated," he whispered. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart racing. There was still so much he did not know. There were still questions waiting for answers. But one thing had changed. He no longer saw Nathan as the man who abandoned him emotionally. He saw a man who had been silently fighting his own fears. And then Nathan said the one thing Ethan never expected to hear. "I do not need Ethan to forgive me today. I just need him to know that I am sorry, and that I would choose him again, every single day." The small wooden box in Nathan's hands carried more memories than Ethan expected. From outside the house, connected only through the quiet sound of the baby monitor, Ethan watched his husband open something he thought had been forgotten years ago. Inside were simple things that once represented the beginning of their life together. A handwritten note from their first anniversary. A small drawing Ethan made when he was still dreaming about becoming a full-time artist. A photograph of the two of them before responsibilities and expectations. Changed everything. Nathan touched each item carefully, as if every memory was something fragile he was afraid to lose. Ethan had always believed he was the only one holding on to the past. But now he realized Nathan had been holding on too. He just never knew how to show it. Nathan looked at the old photograph and smiled sadly. "You were so happy back then," he whispered. "You believed we could build anything together." Ethan remembered that time clearly. They had not been perfect, but they had been hopeful. Nathan would come home late, but he would always find time to sit with him. They would talk about their dreams, their future, and the family they wanted to create. Back then, Ethan never questioned whether Nathan loved him. The doubt came later, slowly, through small moments that became painful memories. The missed dinners, the forgotten conversations, the days when Nathan was physically present but emotionally somewhere else. Ethan watched Nathan hold the photograph for a long moment. Then Nathan said something that made Ethan completely still. "I was not losing interest in you. I was losing confidence in myself." Ethan frowned slightly. He had never heard Nathan speak that way before. Nathan was always the person everyone depended on. He was the person who seemed to have every answer. But now, sitting alone in the nursery, Nathan admitted something Ethan never imagined. After Oliver was born, everything changed. I looked at you and saw how much you gave up for us. Your art, your time, your dreams. And instead of telling you how grateful I was, I convinced myself I had to work harder to make sure you would never regret choosing me. Ethan felt his heart ache. Nathan continued. The more pressure I felt, the more I closed myself off. I thought I was protecting you from my stress. I thought if I carried everything alone, you would not have to worry. But I never realized that my silence was hurting you more than my problems ever could. Of him, they had both been trapped in different versions of the same misunderstanding. Nathan placed the photograph back into the box and took a deep breath. I know apologies do not change what happened, he said softly. I know there were moments when you needed me and I was not there. I know saying I love you now does not erase all those lonely nights. Ethan closed his eyes. Those words mattered because Nathan was not trying to defend himself. He was accepting responsibility. But I want you to know something, Nathan continued. Every day, even when I failed to show it, you and Oliver were the most important parts of my life. The baby monitor remained silent for a few seconds after that. Ethan looked at Nathan, seeing him differently than before. Not as a perfect husband, not as someone without mistakes, but as someone who finally understood the damage caused by those mistakes. Then Nathan reached toward the small camera connected to the monitor and gently adjusted it toward Oliver. I hope one day our son grows up knowing that love is not just something you feel, Nathan whispered. It is something you choose, something you protect, something you show. Ethan felt a quiet shift inside him. The anger that had filled his heart for so long was still there, but it was no longer alone. It now stood beside understanding, sadness, and a small piece of hope. For the first time since leaving, Ethan did not feel like he had walked away from a broken marriage. He felt like he had discovered a hidden part of the person he loved. Ethan knew there was no way to return to the house and pretend nothing had happened. The truth he discovered through the baby monitor had changed everything, but it had not erased the pain he carried. Understanding Nathan was one thing. Facing him was another. For several minutes, Ethan remained sitting in his car parked a short distance away, staring at the warm lights coming from the home they had built together. He thought about all the moments he had wanted Nathan to notice. The quiet mornings when he hoped for a simple conversation. The evenings when he waited for his husband to ask how his day had been. The times when he wanted to share his fears but decided not to because Nathan already seemed overwhelmed. Ethan had spent so long feeling unseen that hearing Nathan's hidden confession almost felt unreal. But he also knew something important. Love did not mean ignoring hurt. Love meant being willing to face it. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped out of the car. Every step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. He did not know what he would say. He did not know if Nathan would understand. But he knew he could not continue hiding either. Inside the house, Nathan was still in the nursery. He had just placed Oliver back into his crib when he heard the sound of the front door opening. Nathan froze. For a moment, hope appeared on his face before uncertainty replaced it. He walked downstairs and stopped when he saw Ethan standing in the hallway. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence between them was filled with years of emotions they had never expressed. Nathan looked at Ethan carefully. "You came back," he said quietly. Ethan looked at him, trying to find the right words. "I heard you," Ethan replied. Nathan immediately understood. His expression changed from surprise to worry. He looked away for a moment, almost embarrassed that Ethan had heard the thoughts he never planned to share. "I did not want you to find out like this," Nathan said. "Then how was I supposed to find out?" Ethan asked gently. "Because you never told me anything." Nathan lowered his eyes. That was the answer he could not argue with. Ethan stepped closer but kept a small distance between them. "Do you know what hurt the most?" Ethan asked. "It was not that you were busy. It was not that your company needed you. It was feeling like I was the only person trying to keep us together. Nathan listened without interrupting. For once, he was not searching for a solution or trying to explain everything away. He was simply listening. I thought you stopped loving me, Ethan admitted. I thought maybe our family was something you felt responsible for, but not something you truly wanted. Nathan looked at him with sadness in his eyes. Ethan, that was never true. I know that now, Ethan said softly. But I needed to. Feel it before tonight. The words stayed between them. Nathan took a slow breath. I failed you. Ethan looked up. Nathan continued. Not because I did not love you. I failed because I assumed love could be understood without being shown. That sentence reached Ethan in a way he did not expect. Because it was exactly what had happened. They had both loved each other, but they had allowed silence to speak louder than their feelings. Nathan moved toward the kitchen and returned with 2 cups of water. It was such a simple gesture, but Ethan noticed it. The small effort. The attempt to create a moment together instead of walking away. They sat at the table where so many quiet dinners had happened. This time, neither of them looked at their phones. Neither of them rushed. They simply talked. They talked about fear. They talked about loneliness. They talked about the dreams they had forgotten while trying to build a future. Upstairs, Oliver continued sleeping peacefully, unaware that his parents were finally having the conversation they should have had years earlier. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt that maybe their story was not ending. Maybe they were finally learning how to begin again. The first morning after their conversation felt different. Nothing magical had changed overnight. The house was still the same. The walls still carried years of memories. The kitchen still held the same wooden table where they had shared countless quiet meals. But something inside the home had shifted. For the first time in a long time, Ethan and Nathan were no longer living around each other. They were finally living with each other. Ethan woke up early and walked downstairs to find Nathan already preparing breakfast. It was a simple scene, something that would have seemed ordinary years ago. But now, it felt meaningful. Nathan looked up and gave him a small smile. I was not sure if you wanted coffee, he said. I remembered you liked it with a little extra cream. Ethan paused. It was such a small detail. Yet it was a detail Nathan had forgotten for too long. You remembered, Ethan said quietly. Nathan nodded. I should have remembered more things. That honesty was what made Ethan stay. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past disappeared. But because Nathan was finally making an effort to understand instead of simply defending himself. Over the next few weeks, they began rebuilding their relationship one moment at a time. Nathan changed the way he approached his life. He started leaving work earlier when possible. He stopped bringing his phone to the dinner table. He asked Ethan about his artwork and actually listened to the answers. At first, Ethan did not know how to respond. Part of him was afraid that these changes would only last for a short time. He had learned to protect himself from disappointment. But Nathan did not give up. He understood that trust was not something he could demand. It was something he had to earn. One afternoon, Ethan found Nathan sitting in the living room with Oliver, helping their son create a drawing. The image was messy and colorful, with lines going in every direction. Nathan, who once spent his days analyzing business plans and financial reports, was now completely focused on a small piece of paper covered with a child's imagination. Ethan stood in the doorway and smiled. This was the moment he had wanted for so long. Not a perfect husband. Not someone who never made mistakes. Just someone who was present. Nathan noticed him watching and smiled. Oliver says the picture needs one more person, he said. Ethan walked closer. Who? Oliver pointed at the empty space on the paper. Nathan answered, You. Ethan felt something warm in his chest. For years, he had wondered if he still had a place in Nathan's world. Now he was seeing the answer clearly. Later that evening, after Oliver was asleep, Nathan and Ethan sat together in the backyard. The city lights were visible in the distance, but the moment felt peaceful. Nathan looked at Ethan and said, I know I cannot change the years I lost. Ethan remained quiet, listening. But I can choose what I do with the years ahead. Nathan reached for Ethan's hand. I do not want to just be someone who loves you in my thoughts. I want to be someone who makes you feel loved every day. Ethan looked at their hands together. It was not a grand promise. It was not a perfect solution. It was a choice, a commitment to keep trying. Ethan finally smiled. Then start today. Nathan nodded. I will. And this time, Ethan believed him. Because love was no longer hidden behind silence. It was being built through actions, through patience, and through the small moments that slowly brought their family back together. For the first time in years, Ethan no longer felt like he was waiting for Nathan to return. He felt like they were both walking toward the same future. The months that followed were not a perfect story, and Ethan knew that was what made them real. A broken connection could not be repaired in a single conversation. A wounded heart did not suddenly forget every lonely moment. But every day, Nathan showed him that change was not just something he promised. It was something he chose. The man who once disappeared into endless work was now learning how to be present. He learned Oliver's favorite bedtime stories. He remembered Ethan's creative ideas. He asked questions and waited for answers instead of assuming he already understood. Small moments became the foundation of something new. One Saturday morning, Ethan found Nathan sitting on the floor of the living room surrounded by colorful papers, crayons, and children's books. Oliver was happily explaining his latest drawing, using a level of seriousness that made Nathan smile. Ethan stood nearby, watching the scene quietly. A year ago, he never imagined he would see this. Nathan looked up and noticed him. You have that smile again, Nathan said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What smile? Nathan smiled back. The one you had before you thought you had to hide it. The words touched something deep inside Ethan. He realized he had changed too. He had spent so much time waiting for Nathan to prove his love that he forgot he was also allowed to heal. He started painting again. At first, it was only small sketches during quiet evenings. Then one day, he opened a blank canvas and realized he was no longer creating from sadness. He was creating from hope. Nathan supported him without trying to control the process. He did not tell Ethan what direction to take. He simply asked how he could help. That difference meant everything. Their family slowly found a new rhythm. Mornings became filled with laughter instead of silence. Dinner became a time to talk instead of a reminder of distance. Weekends became memories instead of missed opportunities. Oliver grew surrounded by two parents who were learning that love was not about being flawless. It was about choosing each other even after mistakes. One evening, Nathan surprised Ethan by bringing him to a small gallery where Ethan's artwork was displayed. Ethan stopped at the entrance, completely surprised. Nathan, what is this? He asked. Nathan looked slightly nervous, a rare expression from someone who was usually so confident. A reminder, he said. You spent years believing you gave up your dreams for us. I want you to know that your dreams were never something you had to lose. Ethan walked through the gallery slowly, looking at his paintings on the walls. Each piece represented a different part of his journey. The loneliness, the confusion, the hope, the love that survived. Nathan stood beside him and quietly said, I am proud of you. Those 4 words meant more than any expensive gift or dramatic gesture ever could, because they were the words Ethan had needed to hear for years. Later that night, they sat together at home after Oliver was asleep. The house was peaceful, not empty, peaceful. Nathan held Ethan's hand and looked at him seriously. There is something I want to ask you, he said. Ethan looked at him with curiosity. Nathan took a deep breath. I know we are already married. I know we already have a family. But I want to choose you again, not because of responsibility, not because of promises we made years ago, but because today I still choose you. Ethan felt his eyes become emotional. The person in front of him was not the same man from their difficult years. Not because Nathan had become someone completely different, but because he had finally learned how to let Ethan see who he truly was. Ethan smiled and squeezed his hand. Then keep choosing me. Nathan smiled. Every day. And in that moment, Ethan understood something important. Their love story was never about avoiding pain. It was about finding each other after the pain and deciding that the future was still worth building together. Years later, Ethan still remembered the night he almost walked away forever. Not because it was the happiest moment of his life, but because it was the moment that changed everything. Sometimes people believe love is proven by never facing difficulties, but Ethan learned that real love was built when two people chose to stay and grow after those difficult moments. The house that once felt filled with silence was now full of life. Every morning began with Oliver running through the hallway, laughing as Nathan tried to keep up with him. The same man who once struggled to express his feelings had become the father who never missed the small moments. Ethan would often stand quietly and watch them together, still amazed by how much had changed. Nathan was still a successful Alpha CEO. He still carried responsibilities and managed a growing company. But now he understood that success was not only measured by achievements outside the home. It was also measured by the memories created with the people who mattered most. Ethan continued creating art, and his work eventually reached more people than he ever imagined. His paintings told stories of hope, family, and second chances. People who saw his work often felt connected to the emotions behind each piece, even without knowing the journey that inspired them. One evening, Ethan sat in his studio looking at a new painting. It showed a simple image of a family standing beneath a bright sky. There was nothing dramatic about it. No perfect details. Just warmth. Just belonging. Nathan walked into the room and looked at the painting for a long moment. "It feels familiar," Nathan said. Ethan smiled. "Because it is." Nathan stepped closer. "Is that us?" Ethan nodded. "It is the family I always hoped we would become." Nathan reached for his hand. "We almost lost this." Ethan looked at him. "Yes, but we found it again." They both understood that their relationship was not special because they never struggled. It was special because they learned from those struggles. They learned that love needed communication. They learned that protecting someone did not mean keeping them away from your feelings. They learned that a family was not built through perfection. It was built through patience, honesty, and choosing each other every day. Years later, when Oliver was older, he found the old baby monitor stored in a box of family memories. He asked why they kept it. Ethan and Nathan looked at each other and smiled. Nathan answered, "Because that little device reminded us of something important." Oliver looked curious. "What was that?" Ethan sat beside him and said, "Sometimes people love each other deeply, but they forget to show it. And sometimes one honest moment can help them find their way back." Oliver smiled, not fully understanding the meaning yet, but feeling the warmth behind the words. That evening, Ethan and Nathan sat together outside their home, watching the sunset. The same kind of peaceful evening that once felt impossible now felt ordinary. And ordinary became their greatest gift. Ethan thought about the person he was before, the person who believed he had been forgotten. He wished he could tell that younger version of himself one thing. Love was not always loud. Sometimes it was hidden beneath fear, mistakes, and things left unsaid. But when two people were willing to listen, understand, and choose each other again, even a broken connection could become something stronger than before. Nathan looked at Ethan and smiled. "Are you happy?" Ethan looked at their home, their family, and the life they rebuilt together. "Yes," he answered, "because we are here." And that was the truth they carried with them forever. Not a perfect love story, not a story without pain, but a story about two people who almost lost each other, then found a way back home.